Good morning and welcome to another day reading another work by Plato, Plato's Crito, where Socrates is now conversing with his friend after he's been imprisoned, after giving his defense in public. This is really the opposite of what was happening in the Apology, where the Apology is really a public forum where he was defending himself before the rulers of the city and was making a public appeal for philosophy. This is the opposite of that, where Plato is characterizing Socrates as just having a one-on-one private conversation with Crito, and is really talking about the role of the laws of society and how it should direct our actions and our and how it is like the practical use of the laws within philosophy itself. And so we get concepts coming up from here that stem forward about say the social contract is first really introduced here, where he's talking about it explicitly, where the tacit agreement we have with the government that if we stay in the country, we are thereby agreeing to uphold the laws or to accept the consequences of our actions in turn. And yeah, I guess we'll see here how Socrates is going to defend himself. It's not overly long today. The Crito itself is only about 15, 16 pages, and the introduction is only a few pages as well. 28 20, yeah, 4 pages. So yeah, I think like in total it's only about 20 pages. So yeah, we'll get to it and we'll talk about it on the way. Perfect. Plato's Crito. At the very center of the Apology, at the very center of the Apology, Socrates proclaims that he will never stop philosophizing, no matter what the Athenians might order him to do. This is the introduction, which is the author's narrative on it. We said that this is Thomas West and Grace Starry West. They're the ones who were contributing to this, I believe. At the very center of the Apology, Socrates proclaims that he will never stop philosophizing, no matter what the Athenians might order him to do. The Crito culminates in Socrates' apparent total submission to the laws of Athens. We seem then to be facing a massive contradiction between a Socrates who in the name of philosophy defies Athens and its laws in the former dialogue, and a Socrates who restores the law's authority in the latter. In large measure, the differences between the two dialogues may be attributed to the differences between their audiences and circumstances. To see why this is so, let us briefly review the action of the Crito. The Crito portrays a private conversation between two old friends in the dark interior of the prison where Socrates is being held until his execution. Crito tries to persuade Socrates to escape and to go into exile. Everything has been arranged. All that is needed is Socrates' agreement to proceed. Crito has not been moved at all by the noble rhetoric of Socrates' defense speech. In fact, he is ashamed of Socrates' conduct at his trial, which he regards as unmanly. Crito even accuses him of injustice and cowardice on the grounds that Socrates is not a courageous defender of his own. Crito's is precisely the perspective of the city, of the many, that Socrates is attacked in the Apology and will attack again here. Socrates responds by trying to persuade Crito that it is preferable for him to obey the laws and suffer the death penalty. To persuade Crito, Socrates must speak on Crito's level. Socrates cannot repeat the appeal to philosophy and the good of the soul which is used in his defense speech, for Crito did not respect that speech. Evidently, Crito particularly respects the opinion of the many. He is preoccupied with the harm that his own reputation will suffer among the many if he fails to rescue Socrates. So Socrates uses the laws of Athens as a lever against the opinion of the many which guides Crito, the opinion that calls for loyalty and defense of one's own. The many, and Crito among with them, respect the laws above all else, at least whenever the full majesty and power of the laws are vividly present into their imaginations. The god-like epiphany of the laws conjured up by Socrates may be explained as Socrates' attempt to overwhelm Crito's care for his own. By means of an awe-inspiring vision of the laws as the supreme authority on earth, Socrates thereby reconciles Crito, the good citizen who admires him, to Socrates' execution and at the same time to the city that condemns him. Our suggestion that Socrates' appeal to the laws in order to persuade Crito raises the question of whether Socrates believes his own appeal. This question is all the more pressing in light of the seeming conflict between the apology of Socrates and Crito regarding the authority of the laws. Would Socrates lie to Crito? It is surely safer to assume that Socrates always tells the truth. In any event, we must take a close look at what he says. Socrates' response to Crito's plea for him to escape falls into two distinct parts. First occurs a dialogue between Socrates and Crito, in which Socrates elicits Crito's acceptance of certain principles of conduct. Then Socrates presents a long speech such as the laws of Athens might deliver if they were to appear before them and address them. The latter rhetorical set piece, in which the laws allow scarcely any opportunity for response, and in which they assert their authority in a despotic tone, contrasts strikingly with the gentle conversation between two old companions which precedes it. In that conversation, Socrates first secures Crito's argument to the view that one should not follow the opinion of the many, but rather that of the expert of the one and truth itself. The expert is to be obeyed because he knows what is best for whoever or whatever is under his supervision. Second, Socrates argues that doing injustice is to be avoided because it injures whatever it is of the things that belongs to us which both injustice and justice concern. Whatever it is of the things that belong to us which both injustice and justice concern. Finally, the two men agree that it is always wrong to return evil for evil in retaliation for a wrong done, and that there can be no common counsel or deliberation between those who affirm this opinion and those who deny it. This speech that Socrates then puts into the mouth of the laws departs surprisingly from these three dialogical results. Let us make explicit these differences which Socrates leaves only implicit. First, the laws assert their authority not on the grounds that they prescribe what is best, but rather on the grounds that they beget, nourish, and educate the citizens. Without the laws, the citizens would be nothing. This absolute dependence on the laws gives rise to the absolute subordination to them. Being the laws, offspring and slave, the citizen has a duty to obey as limitless as a son's duty to obey his father or a slave to his master. Not excellence, but paternity and convention are the criteria of just rule. Second, injustice or disobedience to the laws is to be avoided not because it injures one's own soul, but because it injures and tends to destroy the laws. Third, the laws return evil for evil as a matter of course in their assignment of punishments for disobedience. From here, we may draw several inferences concerning the character of laws in general. Most important, the laws conceal the place of nature in human life. They exaggerate when they claim that they, rather than the parents, beget the city's children, just as their claim to educate them hardly accounts for the higher education of a Socrates. The law's insistence on unconditional obedience reminds one of the gods alluded to in the Euthyphro, whose might alone makes right. Whose might, or arbitrary will, alone makes right. Neither the gods nor the Crito's laws admit the existence of a natural order of right and wrong beyond themselves, in order in light of which the law's commandment ought ultimately to be fashioned. This whole point about might makes right is particularly coming to political discourse now under Trumpism, which authoritarian dictators or populist leaders often utilize in order to state their case or to invoke their political will, and what they're saying here about parents as well, like it's also might makes right is something that they that parents can certainly do as well, because they do have that authority over children in a lot of legal ways and practical ways that just need to take place. But the consent of the governed and higher principles like that is really what I mean. Just look throughout history, and you'll see that, like, with any time an authoritarian leader leads without the consent of the governed, it almost inevitably fails and will fall apart eventually. And I mean, perhaps it's a good parenting principle as well to obtain the consent of the subjects, quote unquote subjects, in order to maintain that good relationship. Okay. Further, when the laws claim to be identical to the city and fatherland, they forget the primacy of the political regime, the way of life of the community as established by its most powerful group. The laws and customs of a democracy are different from those of the aristocracy, as ideological tyranny differs from traditional monarchy. The Soviet communist regime, for example, is extirpating the manners, morals, language, and religion that were formed under the Russian regime of centuries past. As Scholzian shows so well, one might well doubt whether a regime with bad laws has the same right to claim obedience as one with good, or at least decent laws. Besides, laws are presumably made by the human beings who predominate the political order. Yet Socrates' laws in the Crito speak as though they possess a divine pedigree from time immemorial. Perhaps laws as such wish to claim divinity and to identify themselves with the fatherland in order to conceal their human and to some extent arbitrary origin. The laws seem to retreat somewhat with the contract argument that follows. Since the citizen is permitted to emigrate at any time, emigrate. Since citizens are permitted to leave their country at any time, keeping his own things, it follows, says the laws, that remaining in the city is tantamount to approval of the laws and hence to an implicit contract to obey them, which is the basis of the social contract that Rousseau talks about and writes about quite extensively. For why else would one remain if not for the laws? Yet there are many reasons why a man might choose to remain in a city with bad laws. Here again, Solzhenitsyn provides an example. Although he hated the Soviet regime, he refused to emigrate voluntarily because he could not take with him the land, the buildings, or the old pre-revolutionary Russian traditions, not to mention his fellow Russians. One's own things are never completely portable, which is further evidence or further argumentation to suggest that the laws or the political class or the rulers in general, whatever that may look like, need to have the consent of the governed. The laws conclude their speech with arguments that it is good for Socrates to remain in Athens. This final appeal to self-interest is of course incidental to the law's main clause, that Socrates owes them his obedience out of duty, but it does appear to soften the harshness of the claim. The arguments that the laws present are somewhat plausible but hardly convincing. Typical is their statement that exile amounts to a choice between a well-governed city nearby, where Socrates would be reproached for his lawlessness, and an ill-governed city far away, where the manner of life is hostile to virtue. The laws omit to discuss the plausibility of escape to a well-governed place far away, where no one would have heard of Socrates, like Crete. Plato's Laws, which takes place in Crete and whose central character is an old Athenian philosopher stranger who reminds us of Socrates, would seem to show the feasibility of exile there. Plato's Laws is another book that he wrote, and is dense, dry, and not a fun read. The above considerations and others lead one to conclude that Socrates does not accept the laws' arguments. The laws as an argument, as a substantive argument. He certainly does not affirm them himself. At the end, he says that the blooming echo of the law's speech, like that of the passionate music used to cure nervous disorders, drowns out all other arguments. Why then did Socrates stay in prison? He followed the one and truth itself, so far as he was able, the argument that appears best to him upon reasoning. He stated in the dialogical part of the Crito and in the Apology of Socrates. Still, the law of speech is not quite false either, for the laws do provide a practical man's equivalent of philosophy, as a guide to life. They point to the standard of the one and truth itself, to which Socrates seeks to ascend on his own, but which lies beyond the simpler Crito's ken. The simpler Crito's ken. I'm not sure why they use that word. Reverence for the laws instilled the proper human awareness that not everything is permitted. Respect for laws imitates and prepares the way for respect for the truth. Furthermore, the law's authority shines brighter so long as the philosophic quest remains unfinished, as Socrates admits it is. He himself indicates that the expert on the human soul may not be available. The failure of Socrates' educational legislative project to replace the Athenian laws in the Apology of Socrates is appropriately acknowledged by his bow to the laws in the Crito. Finally, we must distinguish between Socrates' self-presentation to the public and Plato's presentation of Socrates to the public. By publishing or inventing the Crito, a most private conversation that would otherwise never have seen the light of day, Plato mitigates and to somewhat conceals the effect of Socrates' defense speech. Plato's Socrates will be remembered by posterity not only as a man willing to die on behalf of a way of life that his city oppressed, but also as a law-abiding citizen of his country. Plato took more care than Socrates that his memory would be preserved. Okay, and that's the end of the introduction. And now we can go to the text. Already not very long. Anything else? I did write a few notes in here. Gosh, I've already passed it. Yeah, I think it's also interesting that Socrates' continual claim. I mean, of course, this is Plato's characterization of Socrates, but the continual claim here that he is pursuing the one and truth itself. Awkward way to phrase it, but it really, I think, demonstrates, say, like the difference between art and commercial success. So like art being like doing something to state a specific message or to achieve a specific purpose is very different than that of trying to achieve commercial success, where commercial success is trying to reach a certain level of commonality and a certain level of baseness that many people can relate to in order to be able to showcase their, say, art in this case. And I think this is the same, where following your path is likened to that art, creating art for a specific purpose versus trying to go after that public opinion. Herein lies a major fault as well, where following your own path, the one truth, when will you know when you're in a pitfall or caught in a rut? Socrates had to disregard everyone's opinion to follow his own path, and so it is only through his own reasoning and logical processes that he is pursuing these things so fervently, but without a way, a checkpoint, like who are the ones to hold him accountable. And I think we see this a lot with like politicians. They become disconnected from public opinion, or they can be disconnected from the people they are governing themselves. And so it's hard for them to perhaps, I think this is really what happened with Trudeau, is that like he becomes disconnected from the people he's governing, or perhaps it's more difficult for him to connect with them because they're starting to not like him so much. And I mean, granted, the guy is great in a crisis and knows how to handle situations, but when you become disconnected, it's where are those accountability measures to hold yourself accountable? And we even see with like Polyev, it's like, oh, I just won't fall into those traps. Like that's the rationale he gives when it's like, how do you know you won't fall into the same traps as the person you're critiquing? And it's just these unsubstantiated claims that, oh, I just won't do those things, I won't fall into those same traps. Well, unless you have a system in place to actually hold yourself accountable, unless you have people there to correct you when you're wrong, people you can trust, and people who have a good moral lens, who don't stand to gain anything by calling you out, or you don't really have a system, a healthy system in place to steer away from those types of same fallacies. So I guess yeah. So I mean, of course, here like Plato is defending his teacher and is trying to legitimize him in a way that he was never able to do in his own lifetime. And by this all being recorded, we can have a taste of what Socrates' life was like and how he approached life in general. And so it's really, Socrates is only finding his redemption arc through his student. And I think that's important to note because he couldn't find any success on his own by pursuing the one truth that he is in search of. Okay. Anyways, so here we go. Plato's Crito. The text itself. So again, it's a conversation back and forth between Socrates and Crito. I'll say their names when it's not apparently obvious who's talking. Socrates, why have you arrived at this hour, Crito? Or isn't it still early? It certainly is. What is the hour, Crito? Just before daybreak. I wonder how it is that the guard of the prison was willing to let you in, Crito. He is accustomed to me by now, Socrates, because of my frequent visits here, and besides, he has never done a certain benefaction by me. Socrates, have you just come, or have you been here long? Fairly long. Why didn't you wake me up right away, instead of sitting beside me in silence? Crito, no, by Zeus, Socrates, nor would I myself be willing to such great sleeplessness and pain. But I have long been wondering at you, perceiving how pleasantly you sleep, and I kept from waking you on purpose, so that you would pass the time as pleasantly as possible. And though I have, of course, often previously regarded you through your whole life as happy in your temperament, I do so especially in the present calamity now. So easily and mildly do you bear it. Socrates, that's because it would be discordant, Crito, for someone of my age to be vexed if he must now meet his end. Crito, others of your age, Socrates, are also caught in such calamities, but their age does not release them from being vexed at their present fortune. Socrates, this is so, but why have you arrived so early? Crito, to bear a message, Socrates. That is hard. Not hard for you, as it appears to me, but for me and for all your companions, it is a hard and grave one. And I, as it seems to me, would bear it if it was most gravely of all. Socrates, what is it? Or has the ship arrived from Delos, after whose arrival I must die? Crito, it hasn't arrived yet, but it does seem to me that it will come today, from the report of some men who have come from Sunium and left it there. So it is clear from these messengers that it will come today, and tomorrow it will be necessary, Socrates, for you to end your life. Well, may it be with good fortune, Crito. If such is dear to the gods, such let it be. However, I don't suppose it will come today. Crito, from what do you infer this? Socrates, I will tell you. Surely I must die on the day after the ship comes. Crito, that's at least what those having authority over these things say. Socrates, then I do not suppose it will come on the day that is upon us, but on the next. I infer it from a certain dream I had a little earlier tonight, that there is probably something opportune in your not having awakened me. Crito. But what was that dream? Socrates. It seemed that a certain woman approached me, beautiful and well-formed, dressed in white, and that she called me by my name, and said, Socrates, on the third day thou wast arrived in fertile Phthia. Crito. The dream is strange, Socrates. No, quite manifest, at least as it seems to me, Crito. Crito. Too much so, as is likely. But daemonic Socrates, even obey me, and save yourself, since if you die, for me it is not just one calamity, apart from being deprived of such a companion as I will never discover again, I will also seem to many, those who don't know you and me plainly, to have been able to save you if I had been willing to spend money, but not to have cared. And yet what reputation would be more shameful than to seem to regard money as more important than friends? For the many will not be persuaded that you yourself were not willing to go away from here, although we were eager for it. But why do we care in this way, blessed Crito, about the opinion of the many? For the most decent men, whom it is more worthy to give thought to, would hold these things have been done in just that way they were done. But Crito. But surely you see that it is necessary, Socrates, to care also about the opinion of the many. The present situation now makes it clear that the many can produce not the smallest of evils, but also the greatest, if someone is slandered among them. Socrates. What would the many could produce the greatest? Would that the many could produce the greatest evils, Crito, so that they could also produce the greatest goods. That would indeed be noble. But as it is, they can do neither, for they aren't capable of making someone either prudent or imprudent, but do whatever they happen to do by chance. Crito. Let these things be so. But Socrates, tell me this, surely you aren't worrying, are you, on behalf of me and the rest of your companions, over the prospect that if you leave here, the informers will make trouble for us on the ground that we stole you away from here, and we will be compelled to lose either our whole substance or a lot of money, or even to suffer something else besides this. If you fear some such thing, leave it aside, for surely it is just for us to save you and run this risk, and one still greater than this, if need be. But obey me and do not do otherwise. Socrates. I am worrying over the prospect of these things, Crito, and of many other things. Crito. Then do not fear these things, for in fact it is not even much money that certain people are willing to take to save you and lead you out from here. Furthermore, don't you see how easily these informers are bought, and that they wouldn't need much money? My money is available to you, and is, as I suppose, sufficient. Furthermore, even if out of some concern for me you suppose I shouldn't spend mine, these foreigners, who are here ready to spend theirs, and one of them has brought sufficient money for this very same thing. Simmias of Thebes and Sebes is ready too, and as many others are. So I say, don't hesitate to save yourself because you fear these things, and don't let it be hard for you to accept, as you were saying in court, because you wouldn't know what to do with yourself if you left. For there are many places where they will greet you with affection when you arrive, and if you wish to go Thessaly, I have guest friends there, who will regard you as important and offer you safety, so that no one throughout Thessaly will cause you pain. Besides, Socrates, you seem to be attempting a thing that isn't even just. You are betraying yourself. Although it is possible to be saved, you are hastening to coming to pass of the very things concerning yourself, which your very enemies would hasten on, and did hasten on in their wish to ruin you. In addition to these things, you seem to me at least to be betraying your own sons too, whom you will leave and abandon. Although it is possible for you to nurture and educate them as far as it lies in you, they will do whatever they happen to do by chance, and chance will bring them, as is likely, just the sorts of things that usually happen to orphans when they are orphaned. Now, one either should not have children or should endure the hardship of maturing and educating them. But you seem to me to be choosing the most easy-going course. Instead, one should choose what a good and manly man would choose. particularly if one has claimed to care for virtue throughout his whole life. For my part, I am ashamed for you, and for us, your companions, that the whole affair concerning you will have to be conducted with a certain lack of manliness on our part. The way the lawsuit was introduced into the law court, even though it was possible for it not to be introduced, the way the judicial contest itself took place, and now this, the ridiculous conclusion of the affair, will seem to have escaped us completely because of a certain badness and lack of manliness on our part, since we didn't save you, nor did you save yourself, although it was possible and feasible if we had been of even a slight benefit. So see to it, Socrates, that these things be not shameful as well as bad, both for you and for us. But take counsel rather, that there is longer time to take counsel, but to have taken counsel. And there is only one counsel, for all these things must be done during the coming night. If we wait any longer, it will be impossible and can no longer be done. But in every way, Socrates, obey me, and in no way do otherwise. Socrates, dear Crito, your eagerness is worth much more if some correctness be with it. If not, the greater it is, the harder it is to deal with. So we should consider whether these things are to be done or not, since I, not only now but always, am such as to obey nothing else of what is mine than the argument which appears best to me upon reasoning. The arguments that I spoke in the past I am not able to throw out now, that this fortune has come to pass for me. Instead, they appear rather alike to me, and I venerate and honor the same ones as I did before. If we have no better argument to say at present, know well that I will certainly not yield to you, not even if the power of many scares us like children, with more hobgoblins than those now present, sending against us imprisonments and executions and confiscations of money. How then would we consider this with all due measure, by taking up the first argument you are making about opinions? Was it said nobly on each occasion or not, that one should pay mind to some opinions but not others? Or was it said nobly before I had to die? Well, now it has become very clear that it was said pointlessly, just for the sake of argument, and that in truth it was child's play and drivel. I desire to consider in common with you, Crito, whether the argument appears at all different to me, now that I am in this position, or the same, and whether we shall leave it aside or obey it. On each occasion, as I suppose, those who supposed that they had something to say somehow used to speak as I was speaking just now, of the opinions which human beings opine. Some must be regarded as important, others not. Before the gods, Crito, does this not seem to you to be nobly spoken? For you, humanly speaking, are not about to die tomorrow, and the present calamity wouldn't lead you astray. Consider then. Doesn't it seem to you, adequately spoken, that one should not honor all the opinions of human beings, but some and not others? What do you say? Isn't this nobly spoken? Crito, nobly. Socrates, to honor the upright opinions and not the villainous? Crito, yes. Socrates, aren't the upright ones those of the prudent and the villainous ones of the imprudent? Crito, of course. Socrates, come then again. Socrates, come then again. How were such things spoken of? Does a man who is exercising and practicing gymnastics pay mind to the praise and blame and opinion of every man, or of one only, who happens to be a doctor or trainer? Crito, of one only. Socrates, therefore he should fear the blame and welcome the praise of the one, but not those of the many. Crito, clearly. Socrates, he is to practice and exercise then, and to eat and drink as sometimes fitting to the one, an overseer and expert rather than to all of the others. Crito, this is so. Socrates, Well then, if he disobeys the one and dishonors his opinion and praise, while honoring those of the many who have no expertise, wouldn't he suffer evil? Crito. Of course. Socrates. What is this evil, and where and at what does it aim among the things belonging to him who disobeys? Crito. Clearly at his body, for this is what it destroys. Socrates. Nobly spoken. Aren't the other things also like this? And in particular, concerning the just and unjust, and shameful and noble, and good and bad things, about which we are now taking counsel, must we follow the opinions of the many and fear it rather than that of the one? If there is such an expert, whom we must be ashamed before and fear more than all the others, and if we don't follow him, we will be corrupt and maim, and that thing which, as we used to say, becomes better by the just and is destroyed by the unjust? Or isn't there anything to this? Crito. I, at least, suppose that there is, Socrates. Socrates. Come then. If we destroy that which becomes better by the healthful, and is corrupted by the diseaseful, because we don't obey the opinion of the experts, is life worth living for us when it has become corrupted? Surely this is the body, isn't it? Crito. Yes. Socrates. So is life worth living for us with a wretched and corrupt body? Crito. In no way. Socrates. But is life worth living for us with that which is life worth living for us with that thing corrupted which the unjust maims and the just profits? Or do we hold that thing to be more paltry than the body, whatever it is of the things that belongs to us, which both injustice and justice concern? Crito. In no way. Socrates. But more honorable? Crito. Much more so. Socrates. Then we ought not at all, O best of men, to give so much thought to what the many will say of us, but rather to what the expert concerning the just and unjust things, to what the one and truth itself will say. So first, it's not correct for you to introduce the claim that we must give thought to the opinion of the many concerning things just and noble and good and their opposites. But the fact is, someone might say, the many are able to kill us. Crito. Yes, clearly this is so. For it might be said, Socrates, what you say is true. Socrates. But you wondrous man, the argument that we have gone through still seems to me, at least, like it did before. Consider again whether the following also still stays so for us or not. Not living, but living well, is to be regarded as most important. Crito. It does say so. Stay so. Socrates. And that living well and nobly and justly are the same. Does it stay so, or does it not stay? Crito. It stays so. Socrates. Therefore, from the things agreed upon, this is an important point in philosophy, making sure your interlocutor, the person you are arguing with, agrees with your base points before you can build your argument. You need a foundation between the two of you, which Socrates does very clearly and is quite skilled at this, to making sure that they're both on the same page about the baseline facts before he builds his argument to prove that they're wrong, which is an important point. Socrates. Therefore, from the things agreed upon, it must be considered whether it is just for me to try to go out of here, although the Athenians are not permitting me to go, or not just. And if it appears just, let us try, but if not, let us leave it aside. As for the considerations that you speak of concerning spending of money and reputation and nurture of children, I suspect that in truth, Crito, these are considerations of those who easily kill and, if they could, would bring back to life again, acting mindlessly, namely the many. Since this is how the argument holds, nothing else is to be considered by us except what we were saying just now, whether we will do just things by paying money and gratitude to those who would lead me out of here, or whether in truth we will do injustice by doing all these things, those of us who are leading out as well as those who are being led out. And if it is apparent that these deeds of ours are unjust, we must take nothing into account compared to the doing of injustice, even if we must die by staying here and keeping quiet, or must suffer anything else whatever. Crito. You seem to me to speak nobly, Socrates, but see what we are to do. Socrates. Let us consider in common, my good man, and if there is some way you can contradict my argument, contradict it, and I will obey you. But if not, blessed man, then stop telling me the same argument again and again, that I ought to go away from here, although the Athenians are unwilling. For I regard it as important to act after persuading you, not while you are unwilling. Now see if this beginning of the consideration is stayed adequately for you, and try to answer what is asked in whatever way you most suppose it to be. Crito. I will try. Socrates. Do we assert that in no way ought injustice to be done voluntarily, or that in one way injustice ought to be done, but in another way not? Or is doing injustice in no way good or noble, as we have often agreed in the past, and which was also said just now? Or have all those former agreements of ours been poured away in these few days? And although at our age, Crito, we old men have long been seriously conversing with each other, were we unaware then that we ourselves are no different from children? Or is it so for us now, more than ever, just as it was spoken then, whether the many say so or not, and whether we must suffer things still harder than these, or maybe milder? Does doing injustice nevertheless happen to be bad and shameful in every way for the one who does injustice, or do we affirm it or not? Crito. We affirm it. Socrates. Then one must in no way do injustice. This is an interesting point here, because you have people on this side of the argument that in no way must we do injustice. And the beginning of the counter argument for the other side, that there is perhaps license to be taken by the philosopher, the one who examines the arguments and lives according to their truth, to the truth, through argumentation. You have arguments like Thoreau, who begins to talk about civil disobedience, but it progresses further with, say, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a particular notable example. He is a German. His Erich Metaxas's biography of him is called Pastor, Prophet, Martyr, Spy. Those are the 4 words he uses. I might have it in the wrong order. But he's a German pastor during World War II who considers these things with great weight on whether or not physical resistance of the current laws in place is good, noble, and just. And he does so from a Christian perspective, of course, because he's a pastor. But his ultimate conclusion is that it is good for someone in his position to not only actively go against the laws, but at one point, his group eventually makes an assassination attempt against Hitler. Of course, they failed, but and he was imprisoned for it. I don't remember the full story of him, but a very deep thinker about these very same questions about whether or not it is good to do injustice, even if it's for the sake of like going against the laws of the city or the laws of the society that they find themselves in. So Bonhoeffer is a direct link to some of the things that are being talked about here, even though they're separated by a good 2,000 years. Okay, Socrates. Then one must in no way do injustice. Crito. Of course not. Socrates. And even he who has done injustice then must not do injustice in return, as the many suppose, since one must in no way do injustice. Crito. Apparently not. Socrates. What then? Should one do evil or not, Crito? Crito. Doubtless one must not, Socrates. Socrates. What then? Is it just or not just for the one to whom evil is done to do evil in return, as the many say? Crito. In no way. Socrates. For surely there is no difference between human beings doing evil and doing injustice. Crito, what you say is true. Socrates, then no human being should do injustice in return or do evil, whatever he suffers from others, and see to it, Crito, that by agreeing to this, you aren't agreeing contrary to your opinion. For I know that this seems and will seem so only to a certain few. So there is no common counsel for those who hold this opinion and those who do not. It is necessary that they will have contempt for each other when they see each other's counsels. So you too consider very well whether you share this opinion in common with me, and whether we should begin taking counsel from here. That it is never correct to do injustice or to do injustice in return, or for someone to whom evil is done to defend himself by doing evil in return. Or do you stand aloof and not share this beginning? For to me it has long seemed so, and still does now. But if it has seemed some other way to you, speak and teach me. But if you abide by the things before them, hear what comes after this. Crito, I do abide by them, and it does seem so to me as well. But speak. Sorry, I'm just going back to Bonhoeffer for a sec. His theory is called the just war cause. It's also interesting, like, we can contrast like the just war cause, like having substantive argument to kill others or to make war against others, and we see that like that sort of holy mindset carried out through the Crusades. But that's completely in contrast to Jesus's way of life, where he subjugated himself to the authority of the government of the time and allowed himself to be crucified. And so you have this real contrasting point of view, even within Christian spheres, of how morality should work. But the same arguments are held outside of religion as well, where, specifically with Jesus as the figure, as a moralistic figure, he is doing it for a certain cause. He is subjugating himself to make a point, to demonstrate how perhaps unruly or how unkind society can be. And of course there's layers and other things to dissect within that. But on the contrary side, you also have this real problem that might makes right. And how else are we supposed to bring about Augustine's The City of God, or a utopian-like society, without using force? To some extent, force is required within society in order to maintain order and to bring about change. And even these things really become difficult considerations when the arbitrariness of laws are available to you. Like, so say, like, as a politician, you can just decide that, say what a great example, seatbelts. The arbitrariness of having to wear a seatbelt, like, so, like, for sure, like, you become a projectile when you come to a sudden stop and you fly through the windshield. But say if we can definitively contain people within a car, should we then still require them to wear seatbelts for their own good, for their own safety, when they can recognize the damage that a vehicle will do to them personally when they're contained within and how much safer they could be when wearing the seatbelt? Those paternalistic laws that can only really be substantiated through these, like, mathematical and, like, by looking at trends and statistical analysis, these, like, beyond line of sight reasonings that aren't really the way we would naturally look at situations. What level, the arbitrariness of these laws as they appear to be, perhaps seatbelts aren't really a great example, and perhaps we can move to something that only directly benefits the individual, like, for instance, like the ban on hard drugs. Like, again, that's a difficult one because it's so addictive. But you get what I'm saying here. When you become responsible, when the politician becomes responsible for voting on these laws and what they are going to support, these are difficult considerations. Is what is good what is just, what will come with the weight, with the force and the weight of the government to enforce. What will those punishments be? These are all like heavy questions that demand lengthy arbitration and lengthy discussion in order to get at some semblance of truth that people can commonly agree to. And it is important that we don't that like politicians don't offend people's moral sensibilities in this way, because again, we want to maintain the consent of the governed on the one hand, but also we're the political class is trying to become paternalistic in some ways and use these beyond line of sight reasonings that only make sense in the aggregate, in the whole data set, in order to become reasonable. And so like here we see like the beginnings when we put reason above piety and we say we will only do things that make sense. And really piety is kind of removed from our moral discussion at all on what we consider good, because reasoning must take that course, must make sense to not only us but also have a benefit. But at what point is it too far? So if only, and this is where the real questions come down to, and is a research paper that I was really wanting to write and to get into the details of, is to use, what do they call that, where you use math in court and in insurance. Oh, there's a fancy name for it. But when you engage in these, when you look at the statistical models, and you can clearly see that if we impose more rules and become more paternalistic as a society, we can save more lives. But it becomes this game of jumping through hoops just to be able to live your life, and we can see that with like this liberal kind of society that's really kind of slowing the gears of the economic machine down, because you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get, oh, you need the health inspector to sign off, you need the building inspector to sign off, meanwhile, like these are, I mean, let's be honest, like we're, for the most part, like there's, the rarity of these events are so rare, but the devastation they can cause when they're not being followed is so high in magnitude, because any loss of life is not an acceptable measure in today's society. So oftentimes rules are written in blood, and so it's only when someone dies that new rules are implemented, and it's written in such a way as to invoke the least amount of change. This is certainly our modern way of approaching lawmaking, is that rules are written in blood. Specifically, like within like the fire department or building code, that when someone dies of an incident, we investigators go in and they will try to figure out the exact points of failure that happened. Yeah, anyways, you get the point, and it goes into a lengthy discussion about, and now we need to kind of look back and see like any loss of human life isn't acceptable in today's modern society for things that are not beyond that, for things that are beyond our line of sight. And so we need to create these rules, but it's certainly at contrast with how many people would like to live their life, which is to have this like ultimate freedom to be able to do whatever you want within your own spheres of control. And so that's kind of the tension there that is starting to be teased out here. But again, like what who's that author? Alan Bloom talks about in Plato's Republic in his interpretive essay. It's Plato, and through Socrates as well. Plato's Republic in specific is the starting point for philosophy, and often has the roots of philosophy and political science. Basically, our entire discussion of philosophy and political science can be rooted in Plato, because you could see the beginning of these arguments start to be fleshed out throughout all these texts, and of course people go on to talk much more and to dive much deeper into these discussions and to really tease out what that actually means in more modern takes of what's on how we even approach these issues. So that's kind of like how we can look at this and apply it to our own situation. So you have the just war cause that we just talked about. So anyways, very interesting things, and we'll go back to the text. We're on page 108 of 114. Okay. Socrates. Then no human so I read this paragraph, but I'll read it again. Then no human beings should do injustice in return or do evil, whatever he suffers from others. And see to it, Crito, that by agreeing to this you aren't agreeing contrary to your opinion. For I know that this seems and will seem so only to a certain few, so there is no common counsel for those who hold this opinion and those who do not. It is necessary that they will have contempt for each other when they see each other's counsels. So you too consider very well whether you share this opinion in common with me, and whether we should begin taking counsel from here. That it is never correct to do injustice, or to do injustice in return, or for someone to whom evil is done to defend himself by doing evil in return. Or do you stand aloof and not share this beginning? For to me it has long seemed so, and still does now. But if it has seemed so some other way to you, speak and teach me. But if you abide by the things from before, hear what comes after this. Crito. I do abide by them, and it does seem so to me as well. But speak. Socrates. Again, I'll say what comes after this, or rather ask, ought someone to do the things he agrees upon with someone, if they are just, or ought he to evade them by deception? Crito, he ought to do them. Socrates. Observe what follows from these things. If we go away from here without persuading the city, do we do evil to some, indeed to those whom it should least be done to, or not? And do we abide by the things we agree to, if they are just or not? Crito. I have no answer to what you speak. Socrates. For I don't understand. Socrates. Consider it as follows. What if the laws and the community of the city should come and stand before us, who are about to run away from here, and to ask, tell me, Socrates, what do you have in mind to do? By this deed are you attempting that you are attempting? What do you think you're doing, if not destroying us laws and the whole city, as far as it lies in you? Or does it seem possible to you for a city to continue to exist and not to be overturned, in which the judgments that are reached have no strength, but are rendered ineffective and are corrupted by private men? What shall we say, Crito, to these and other such things? For someone, especially an orator, would have many things to say on behalf of this law if it were destroyed, the law that orders that the judgments reached in trials be authoritative. Or shall we tell them, the city was doing us injustice and did not pass judgment correctly? Shall we say this, or what? Crito. Yes, this. By Zeus, Socrates. Socrates. Then what if the law should say, Socrates, has it been agreed to by us and by you to do this, or to abide by whatever judgments the city reaches in trials? If then we should wonder at their saying this, perhaps they would say, Socrates, do not wonder at what is said, but answer. Since you have been accustomed to make use of questioning and answering, come now, what charge are you bringing against us and the city if you are attempting to destroy us? First, didn't we beget you, and didn't your father take your mother and bring you forth through us? Tell us then, do you in some way blame those of us laws that concern marriages for not being noble? I do not blame them, I would say. What about those concerning the nature and education of the one being born? Or didn't those laws among us which have been ordered for this end order your father nobly, when they passed among the command to him to educate you in music and gymnastic? Nobly, I would say. Well then, since you were born and nurtured and educated too, could you say first that you are not ours, both our offspring and slave, you yourself as well as your forebears? And if this is so, do you suppose that injustice is equal for you and for us? And do you suppose that it is just for you to do in return whatever we attempt to do to you? Now, with regard to your father, Justice was not equal for you, so that you didn't also in return whatever you suffered. You didn't contradict him when he spoke badly of you, nor did you beat him in return when you were beaten. Or did you or do any other such thing. So it is then permitted to you to do so with regard to the fatherland and the laws. So that if we, believing it to be just, attempt to destroy you, then you too, to the extent that you can, will attempt to destroy us laws and the fatherland in return. And will you say that in doing this you are acting justly, you who in truth care for virtue? Or are you so wise that you have been unaware that fatherland is something more honorable than mother and father, and all of the other forebears, and more venerable, and more holy, and more highly esteemed among gods and among human beings who are intelligent? And that you must revere and give way to and fawn upon a fatherland more than a father when it is angry with you, and either persuade it or do whatever it bids, and keep quiet and suffer if it orders you to suffer anything, whether it be beaten or to be bound, or that if it leads you into war to be wounded or killed, this must be done. And that this is just, and that you are not to give way or retreat or leave your station, but that in war and in court and everywhere you must do whatever the city and the fatherland bid, or else persuade it what the just is by nature, and that it is not pious to do violence to mother or father, and still less by far to the fatherland than to them. What shall we say in reply to these things, Crito? What the laws say is true or not? Crito: it seems so to me at least. Socrates: then consider, Socrates. Socrates is saying, then consider, Socrates. The laws would perhaps say that if what we say is true, the things you are attempting to do to us are not just. For although we begat, nourished, and educated you, and gave you and all the other citizens a share in all the noble things we could, nevertheless we proclaim, by making it possible for any Athenian who wishes, once he has been admitted to adulthood and has seen the affairs of the city and the laws, that if we do not satisfy him, he is allowed to take his things and go away wherever he wishes, and none of us laws is an obstacle or forbids anyone from going wherever he wishes, keeping his own things, whether one of you wishes to go to a colony or to go and settle in another home somewhere, but to whoever of you stays here and sees the way that we reach judgments and otherwise manage the city, we say that he has already agreed with us indeed to do whatever we bid, and when he does not obey, we say that he does injustice in 3 ways, in that he does not obey us who begat him, nor us who nurtured him, and in that although he agreed to obey us, he neither obeys nor persuades us if we do something ignobly, although we put forward an alternative to him and do not order him crudely to do whatever we bid, but permit either 2 things, either to persuade us or to do it. But he does neither of these. To these charges, Socrates, we say that you too will be liable if you do what you have in mind, but you do not least of the Athenians, but more than anyone among them. If then, I should say, because of what? Perhaps they would accost me justly and say that more than anyone among the Athenians I happen to have agreed to this agreement. They would say, Socrates, we would have great proofs that both we and the city were satisfactory to you, for you would never have exceeded all the other Athenians in staying at home in it unless it had satisfied you exceedingly. You never went out of the city to see the sights except once in Isthmus, nor did you ever go anywhere else except when you were with the army on campaign somewhere. Nor did you ever make any other journey, as other human beings do, nor did a desire ever take hold of you to know another city or other laws. We and our city were sufficient for you. So vehemently were you choosing us and agreeing to be governed in accordance with us, that among other things, you also had children in it, as though the city was satisfactory to you. Furthermore, in the trial itself, you could have proposed exile as your penalty if you had wished, and what you are attempting now, when the city is unwilling, you could have done then when it was willing. But you were then pluming yourself on not being vexed if you should have to die, and you chose death, as you said, before exile. Well, now you are not ashamed of these speeches, nor did you heed the laws, since you are attempting to correct us. And you are doing just what the palterous slave would do, attempting to run away contrary to the contracts and agreements according to which you contracted with us to be governed. So first answer us this very thing, whether that we say is true or not, when we claim that you have agreed in deed, but not in speech, to be governed in accordance with us. What are we to say in reply to this, Crito? Shall we not agree? Crito: necessarily, Socrates. Socrates: so are you not transgressing, they would say, your contracts and agreements with us, although you did not agree to them under necessity and were not deceived? Nor were you compelled to take counsel in a short time, but during 70 years, in which you could have gone away if we were not satisfactory, or in the agreements did not appear to be just to you. But you chose instead neither Lacedaemon nor Crete, and you yourself on occasion say that they have good laws, nor any other of the Greek cities in the barbarous ones. Rather, you took fewer journeys away from the city than the lame and blind and the other cripples. So exceedingly did it, and we laws satisfy you more than the other Athenians, clearly. For whom would a city satisfy without laws? But you will in fact not abide now by what you have agreed to. You will, if you obey us, Socrates, and you will not become ridiculous by going out from the city. For consider, if you transgress these things and commit any of these wrongs, what good will you produce for yourself or your companions? For it is rather clear that your companions will themselves risk being exiled and being deprived of their city or losing their substance. And as for yourself, first, if you go to one of these nearest cities, to Thebes or Megara, you will come as an enemy, Socrates, to their political regime, and those very ones among them who are concerned for their own cities will look askance at you, believing that you are a corrupter of the laws, and you will confirm the judges in their opinion, so that they will seem to have judged the lawsuit correctly. For whoever is a corrupter of the laws would surely seem very much to be a corrupter of young and mindless human beings. So will you flee the cities with good laws and the most decorous most decorous men? And if you will do this, will life be worth living for you, or will you consort with these men and shamelessly converse with them? With what speeches, Socrates, the ones that you speak here, that virtue and justice are of the most worth to human beings, and customs and laws? And do you not suppose the affair of Socrates will appear unseemly? One must suppose so. But will you depart from... This is still Socrates speaking. But will you depart from these places and come to the guest friends of Crito in Thessaly? There, of course, is very much disorder and lack of restraint, and perhaps they would be pleased to hear from you how laughably you ran away from the prison by covering yourself with some disguise, putting on either a leather skin or other disguises such as those who run away usually use. And by altering your own figure, is there no one who will say that you, an old man with only a little time left in life, as is likely, dared so greedily to desire to live by transgressing the greatest laws? Perhaps not. If you don't cause pain to anyone. Otherwise, Socrates, you will hear many things unworthy of yourself. You will live by fawning upon all human beings and being their slave. And what else will you be doing but feasting well in Thessaly, as though you had journeyed to Thessaly for dinner? Where will those speeches concerning justice and the rest of virtue be for us then? Is it rather that you wish to live for your children's sake, so that you may nurture and educate them? What then? Will you take them to Thessaly to nurture and educate them? making them for foreigners so that they will have this advantage too? Or, if not this, if they are nurtured here, will they be better nurtured and educated because you are alive when you won't be with them? No, for your companions will take care of them for you. Will they take care of them if you journey to Thessaly, but not take care of them if you journey to Hades? If in fact those who claim to you to be your companions are of any benefit at all, one must suppose at least that they will. But Socrates, obey us, your nurturers, and do not regard children or living or anything else as more important than justice, so that when you go to Hades, you will have all these things to say in your defense before those who rule there. If you do these things, it does not appear to be better or more just or more pious here, either for you or for anyone else of those who are yours. Now it will be better for you when you arrive there. If you depart now, you will depart having been done in justice, not by us laws, but by human beings. But if you go away so shamefully, doing injustice in return, and doing evil in return, transgressing your own agreements and contracts with us, and doing evil deeds to those to whom they should be least be done, yourself and friends and fatherland and us, then we will be angry with you while you leave, and our brothers, the laws in Hades, will not receive you favorably there, knowing that you even attempted to destroy us as far as it lay in you. But let not Crito persuade you to do what he says, rather than what we say. Know well, my dear comrade Crito, that these things are what I seem to hear, just as the Corybantes seem to hear the flutes. And this echo of these speeches is booming within me and makes me unable to hear the others. Know that insofar as these things seem so to me now, if you speak against them, you will speak in vain. Nevertheless, if you suppose that you will accomplish anything, speak. Crito: but Socrates, I have nothing to say. Socrates: then let it go, Crito, and let us act in this way, since in this way the god is leading. And that's it. That is Crito. I'm going to Aristophanes' Clouds was on the schedule for next. It is quite lengthy. 176 to 115. Yeah, so I mean, not overly lengthy. It's like 51 pages or so. No, that's not right. 65 pages. But I'm not sure if it'll be overly useful. It's mostly just a critique of Socrates, saying that he's aloof and doesn't know anything, and that he focuses on all the wrong things. So I'll give it a quick read, and if it's worthwhile, we'll dive into that tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll see what books I have. Ooh, then we could start diving into Plato. I think the only main text I want to cover. There is another book with Socrates as a main figure, the Symposium, but it mostly focuses on love and it's a very bizarre poem about love. I would call it more poetic than anything else, about how two people come together and fall in love. There's all these theories about what it is, like two humans, like what a soulmate is, and two humans coming together that were separated by some divine nonsense. Interesting, but not necessarily relevant to our discussion and pursuit forward in philosophy and political science. So I'll leave the Symposium for you to read yourself. I'll likely leave the Clouds for those who are keen to read it. They can read it themselves. But I'll read it just to see if there's anything good in it, because it has been a while. But then likely we're going to be moving on to Plato's Republic, which is the crown jewel of Plato's work and is the inspiration for many people to pursue philosophy in the first place, myself included. So there you go, and we'll talk to you another time.